that, none of the learning that he did, the 4 years that he spent doing his social sciences, and then the 2 years that he went for his graduate program, I don't think any of it went to waste. And I don't think any learning ever goes to waste, whether he turned or he did a U-turn and then, came out at the, he did something so completely different as art, as what you may imagine as being completely different, and because it informed his art so deeply. Make this a full screen. I'll show you. I'll start with what we found when Asim passed. We were looking through his the things that he left behind, and just can you start with the first one? So then we can just. Yeah, we found. That's fine. I can just move it.
So you show it.
Yeah.
It's good to see a bigger prints. I think it's kind of. Has it just? Now we just need to.
We found several of his sketchbooks. In fact, there were more than 20 or 25 that we sifted through. And if you see his sketchbook, there are at least 40 pages to a sketchbook, and it means that there were like 400 to 500 pages of finished sketches. And what that means is that there was a sketchbook with him constantly. It was like talking to a friend, and he kept a sketchbook with him like we keep a diary, or we keep a memo pad, or we keep a recorder. So he was constantly talking to somebody. It was like talking to a friend. It was talking to somebody. It was like having a diarist, having a scribe. And it's unusual these days to find someone doing that, because people nowadays, or artists nowadays, are scared to put down things on paper because they are not adept at sketching. So they don't like to do that. And Asim, in fact, was the other way around. He was constantly in search of wanting to make himself better. After doing, he knew that he was starting afresh, that he had to start from scratch, and he knew that although he had been painting for so long himself, but he sort of saw himself as being a novice. And he did not consider himself to be better than anyone. He had already got a bachelor's degree, and he had done half a master's program. And yet he said, I'm going to start from the bottom rung of the ladder. So you can imagine that there was no sense of superiority for him. It was the other way around. It was a sense of, no, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do this just like everybody else. I'm older than most people in the class, and he was older than most of the other people who had joined in the class. But there was that eagerness and that sense of zealousness that he joined the class, and he was going to be 10 times better than everybody else. And yet there was this feeling of insecurity that, I'm older, but I've got to do this better. And he needed to try harder. So you can see that his skill is far better than most of the other people. It takes years for people to get this good. And yet there was this insistence that I have to be better, and I have to be stronger, and I have to try harder. And you can see his determination and his persistence to be better. And then while he was sketching, he used to take notes, and he used to talk about, he was talking about things about his own existential angst, and he talks about things the way he's feeling about things. And these are things that he collated, that he collected, that he documented, things that were completely unrelated sometimes, things that you wouldn't imagine. But he kept a document of these things, and he came back to them. Sometimes things that he did in 2012, he came back to them in 2000, in the early 2000s. He came back to them in 1998 or in 2000. He came back to it later, you know, and because it was an idea that he had struck, it was a kernel of an idea, and he came back to it many years later, and he took it up into a larger structure of a painting. And then from doing things like ordinary things that you would imagine that, you know, why would he do things like this? Why would he make a painting or make a sketch of something that was ordinary, or make a physical drawing of an animal or of a human being? He started doing things that were metaphoric, or he was symbolic, or it was outwardly or otherworldly, because it was not enough for him. Things that were around him, or things that were seen by the eye, by the physical eye, were not enough for him. So he started imagining things that were otherworldly, and that was where his imagination took him. And the ideas, now what started informing him were things that he had read. Now, if he had read Nietzsche, and if he had read other philosophers and things and mythological stories, everything informed his art. That was all those years of reading and learning, everything informed his art. And that was the depth to which Asim's art was existing. And people don't understand I think the extent to which his art survived. I don't think people are really understood to what extent his art meant, you know. I think they read it at a very superficial level. Now, if we look at things and people say, but it's ghastly and it is otherworldly, we don't understand it. Most of the time, people did not understand his art, and a lot of people refused him shows in galleries because they did not understand his art. He went to England once, and he looked at galleries where there were the famous the Renaissance artists, and then he wrote this angst-filled letter once, and he said, I wish I could paint like Titian, and I wish I could paint like Tintoretto. And it was not the fact that he couldn't paint like them. He could, but he had this yearning to be perfect, and this yearning for perfection. And he knew that he did not really want to be perfect, but he wanted to be great. And that was his angst, that was his ideal in life, that he wanted to be great. And you see his level of skill, it's very, very great. It is amazing, his level of skill, but it was never enough for Asim. And you see even when he's drawing his artwork, he has little bits of this imagination that's running away with him all the time. Why is there a jack of spades at the side? What does it mean? And where is this imagination running? Where is it going? What is this thing that he wants to say? It is something ticking at the back of his mind that the physical world and the physical collision of the world is not enough for him. And he wants to add something more to what is the physicality of the present. This was a huge sketch that he did. It was three pieces of paper that he put together, which he did for a sitter. He had a sitter for which he did this sketch. We will see some of his paintings now, and we see he used to go out at night and he used to take photographs, and the way he transforms an ordinary physical idea or a physical a landscape or just an ordinary time that he's seen. It's just a man at a petrol pump, and he's filling gas for a car, and he makes it so surreal. If you see the way the light shines on this person, and the way the man's tattoo is, and the way he's standing, and everything suddenly creates a narrative for it, and there becomes a story, and then you start to wonder, and you start to put a whole storyline into the painting, and it becomes dark, and it's nighttime, and there's a light shining, and you want to know where the light is shining from, and what is this aspect that he is looking from. It's like a downward motion that he is looking at the person from, and then the masculinity of the man suddenly comes into view, and there's a whole view that we don't notice. It's just a man at a gas station, and he has imbued it with a narrative of his own, and he had a way of doing this, taking ordinariness and making it extraordinary. Asim had this way of doing this. There is this scene that he's taken, and it's a quiet scene in an old part of Karachi where he's just taken these dogs, and you can almost hear the scene. You can hear it because it's dark and it's quiet, and you can hear these dogs barking in the night. And there's the sulfur lights that make the scene yellow, and interestingly, the painting is called Bully and Bitch, and you can tell the barks of the dogs, and you can see that there's a narrative going on here, and you can see that there's a confrontation and an altercation going on between the dogs. And this one is called Nothing. There's this man who's seated on this beautiful green couch, and he is listening to his own heartbeat through a stethoscope, and he's not hearing anything, and he's got this slight grin on his face, and it's an enigmatic look, and the word says nothing, as if there's no heartbeat, and yet you know that there is, that he's alive. And here he'd gone on this trip to England, and he's seen this scene where these women are playing pool in England. And again, the light, the way it diffuses, where it's not diffused, that it's sharp, the light, and the way the shadows exist, they create a sense of a narrative. And this was a scene from Walter's Small, which is where the last of the dogs were raised in London, which has closed out now. Yeah. And he had taken this, and Asim had this relationship with animals. He had this very primordial relationship with animals, and he felt that he could understand animals much better than he could understand human beings. And he, in fact, he used to imbibe human attributes to animals a lot. And he's done this with that painting that Khura was referring to. And the way I interpreted that particular painting was like that. Let me show you. This is the one that Khura was talking about. How did you interpret this? Did you think that it was horrific?
When I first saw it, yes.
You didn't think it had a sense of humor about it?
It certainly has its origins in a very humorous conversation.
Look at the grin on the face. It is certainly filled with contempt for the human being. You don't think so?
No, I do. The contempt.
Yeah, it's almost, that's why it's more contempt, I think. Yeah. For me, it's like that. Come and get me. It's like that. In fact, he wrote that line about this painting. He said that the Bakra is saying to the human being, so you think you can get me, so come and get me. Yeah. And there's a kinetic shake to the to the knife. You know, it's in movement, it's in motion. And then this was a terrific painting also of a man. It's a very small painting also, but it's very beautifully done because the man has a dog collar around his neck. So again, this constant relationship between an animal and a human being, and it was sometimes it's almost blurred, the relationship between the human and the animal. This was a very interesting. It's a series of 5 paintings, in fact, and I haven't juxtaposed them very well. It's called Character Assassination, and it was. It's almost like. It's his own. It's a self-portrait. He calls it a self-portrait, and it's a character assassination 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's the body of a person lying on the bathroom, and the tiles, and there's bloods being spilled on the white tiles. Again, the way that Asim used to take an object and then be able to transform it into something completely different was the way he used to be able to create a huge narrative about something that was different. He had gone to see this, he saw this fire engine at Mohata Palace many years ago, and he said, I saw this when I went with a group of people. Many years later, he made a painting about it, but he put this man under it, which was a very strange way of looking at a fire engine, an old fire engine. And you wonder why he would have done that. And then you start to wonder about what is the relationship of the man, and why is he under the fire engine and not on top of it, and why is it an antique fire engine? And he actually saw that antique fire engine, which is very old. It was part of a museum collection. And this is also an interesting painting. It's called Dude, Where's My Car? And it's an old part of Karachi, and there's this taxi driver, and it's hot and sultry, and he's driving around with his lights on inside the car, but he doesn't have his shirt on, so it's a bit suspicious, salacious looking, seedy looking. It's like the seedy underbelly of the city, and you know, it's just like it has so much to say, the painting. And again, you know, the kind, just the posture of the person, the car, where it is, the colors they are, the things that he uses, it's just an unusual way of transferring something, of putting ideas into things, ordinary things, and making them extraordinary. This was what Asim used to be able to do, to make ordinary things extraordinary, because he put into them years of learning, years of having read things, and having the knowledge of things that had existed before. And maybe if you couldn't understand them, it was because you didn't know enough, and you didn't need to know, but it was just, it filled you with a sense of wonder, and that was what Asim's paintings did. And you feel, you know, that this is an unusual painting again. It's like you're looking out into something. There are these policemen, and you wonder why they're sitting inside this house. And look where the light is. You're looking into the light. It's almost like the light is glaring into your eyes, and they're hurting your eyes. And he always had a different way of looking at things. That was Asim's strong point.
Caravaggio also, he was really influenced by his use of
That's right.
Yeah.
And this chiaroscuro way of having this strong source of light, and then having a darkness. There's always a dark scene, but there's always one source of light.
Mysterious source.
And he says this very interesting thing that he says, these images to me are as much about history and memory as they are about personal relationships. Therefore, these paintings are about universal human experience. For though they draw on specific experiences, scenes from life, real men and women, they do not claim to portray them for who they are. For how can they lay such a claim? These are not portraits, therefore, but rather illusions that narrate where my sitters and settings serve as characters in stories, tropes used to reflect, unravel, resolve, and relate, to suggest and seduce, reveal and regale in the play of paint that seeks to even the odds, stacked as they variously. So this was Asim's idea. Not to portray what was on the surface, not to portray or represent what was on the surface, but to take out and to portray what was on the inside, and to make what was unseen, to go to the heart of the matter, to represent what was not there, and to represent more than that there was there. Some of the graffiti work that Asim had done was, of course, the Eject sign that became very famous across Karachi, and we used to go out of our houses and we used to see these. And he used to sneak out in the middle of the night to do this, a dangerous thing that he used to do, and I'm sure it must have given a lot of pangs of fear to his family, and because those were dangerous times. And we cannot even imagine now how dangerous those times were. And of course the stop signs that also became very famous, and this was done on a burnt up car that had been done during the riots. And this extremely hilarious thing that he had done on a police container, which I don't know how he had the guts to do. He rubbed out the words P and O, police, and he wrote pubic instead of P and O, so it's spelled pubic lice. And then instead of Marlboro writes, Marchoro fights, and 1 million refugees. So he had this way of transforming words into and letters into what he wanted to say. And this was on the trip that he took from Karachi across up to Lahore, graffiti yatra, which he called graffiti yatra journey, graffiti journey. This was to protest the Shariat bill, which he called Shariat ill. And across the journey, he talked to people, and the people on the street and the people in the villages, and he stopped and he used to talk to them in the heat and in the little villages. He used to make them understand what he was doing, and he used to take their opinions, and he used to ask them what they thought about it, and try and educate them. And of course, they all knew what was going on, and they were very well in tune with what he was doing. And this was a symbol that he created to represent rape that he created himself.